We used to play that tune a lot in Boston brass shows, and it's been a very, very long time since we've played that, and we didn't talk at all about how we were going to end it. So it was just kind of like we got to the ending, and then I was like,
"Oh, he's still playing. I should do something else."
Yeah, there we go.
Do the wind sound.
We got to the edge of the page, and then I was like, "Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like I should keep playing." And so then he started playing, and then I played a little more, and then we were like, "Let's do a diminuendo." So then we did that, and then it was totally planned. You liked it, right? Yeah, absolutely. It was totally planned. Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of exciting. I was like, all right, good. Well, I'm awake.
I'm out of notes. He's still going. Okay, well, we'll just go.
I have a 9-month-old son at home, and he's teething, which is awesome. Not awesome for him or really anybody. And so I was up for a good chunk of the night. But I'm awake now. So as a result of not knowing what the heck was going on with that tune. Okay, so we're going to talk about the title of the presentation, which sounds very formal, is Low Brass 101, It's Just Business. And this really isn't specific to low brass at all, but we didn't want trumpet players to show up for obvious reasons, so we called it low. Yeah, we traveled with those people for way too long. So anyway,
anything more than a day is too long, actually.
So that's actually the whole presentation. Anybody have any questions? The kind of the overriding principle that you want to be asking yourself is something that's talked about in the marketing world an awful lot, which is what is your point of differentiation? And what that means is, what do you have going for you that I don't, and the guy on your left and the girl on your right does not have going for them? And that goes for if you are a soloist, that goes for if you're a teacher, that goes for if you are, certainly if you are an ensemble. We figured out very early on in Boston Brass that we were not just competing against the Canadian Brass and against the Dallas Brass, that we were also competing against Chinese acrobats, and that we were competing against small ballet companies, and we were competing against two piano comedy shows, and basically anybody that could get hired by the people that we were trying to get hired by, we were competing against. And that was something that they don't necessarily make super clear in music school, you know, like where you just kind of, there's kind of an understanding that if you get really good at the tuba, then you will make money. And sometimes that is absolutely the case. And then there's the other times when you can be really good at the tuba and you're not making any money. And some of the stuff that we're going to talk about for the next 49 minutes will hopefully give you some ideas as to maybe some directions that you might want to head in in terms of addressing that. So first we're going to start with Lance talking about, in general terms, talking about developing a skill set that is marketable.
We live in a spectacular time, and we live in a terrifying time. And what's spectacular about it is that we have the world as our audience now. When I was coming up, the only recording that I had of euphonium was an album, which was a piece of vinyl about that big. Anyway, it's a Leonard Falcone album, and that was my only opportunity to hear fine euphonium playing, professional level euphonium playing, and so my world was geographically restricted, and that's obviously no longer the case. You can, with your phone, you can hear some of the most amazing playing that is being done anywhere on the planet. And so who you're competing against now is literally the globe. And so that's wonderful and terrifying. And so what we have to do is identify, well, what is it? What is our message? I teach music business in a marketing communications class at Carnegie Mellon University, and the thing that I hit them over the head with over and over and over and over again is, what is your message? It's not enough to say, I'm wonderful, I can play the daylights out of these excerpts and these pieces and that solo repertoire. Now money should just fall out of the sky into my pocket because I like living indoors and eating food. It doesn't work that way. If it ever did, it certainly doesn't now. So there's a great obligation on you to take the responsibility to figure out what you can do that nobody else can do, because how you play a Rochu is different than how everybody else who has ever played a Rochu has played it, and how anybody else will. And so we need to know why you. And why not that person? And what do you bring to the table that they don't? And it can be a musical thing. It can be, in my case, it's been comedic. It's been writing. It's been a variety of instruments. It's sort of doing to get better at your instrument. One of the things you have to do is you have to sit down and look in the mirror and listen back to your recordings and say, I am really good at this stuff and I suck at this stuff. I stink on ice on this stuff. And usually what we want to do is run away from that stuff. And that's because we are afraid to fail, and we're afraid to sound bad. We don't like to sound bad. You can walk through any music school anywhere on the planet, and you're going to hear some people who are just ripping through the stuff that they already know how to do, and you'll hear a smaller subset of players who sound bad by some measure of our saying, yes, you're good or you're bad because you played the right or the wrong notes. I'm going to put my money on the folks who are struggling with the things they cannot do. Because the fastest way to get better at anything that you want to get better at in life is to look at those things naked and blind and say, not literally, it's a metaphor. And work on that stuff. We don't want to. It's a fear, it's protective, it's primitive. It's from the primitive part of our brain where we were having to run away from large animals who wanted to eat us. That part of our brain is trying to protect us. We have to just acknowledge that the fear is there, but what we need to do is the hard work of working on that stuff. There's a thing called the 80-20 principle, and without going too far into the origins of it, if you can identify that 20% of your playing, or the 20% of the piece, the concerto or the excerpt that you're working on, or the 20% of the physical things you have to do, range and articulation, whatever it is, whatever that 20% that if I said, hey, bring your horn up here, we want you to do blank, that thing that you're afraid, oh, I hope they don't ask us to do, but whatever that thing is, use that as a compass. Don't run away from it. Use it as a compass. I'm afraid of my multiple tongue. So therefore, I need to go spend time on my multiple tongue. I'm afraid about setting up a website. I've never done it before. I don't know anything about it. You got to go in the direction of it, not away from it, and spend 80% of your time on that 20% of the whatever it is that scares the daylights out of you.
To interject in terms of embracing failure, there's a video that I would recommend to everybody that is very powerful. There's a gentleman by the name of Derek Sivers, I believe is how you pronounce his name, S-I-V-E-R-S. And if you were to Google his name and failure, then there's like a 10-minute video on YouTube where that I have I've shown that to every single one of my students. It's really fantastic. It shows a Picasso painting that Picasso actually took a photograph of it every part of the way, and it shows how many times he painted over, and like the plot of the painting is even changing as it keeps on going. And it's a really, really powerful video to kind of encourage all of us to fail.
He's a music guy. He's the guy that created CD Baby. It just started as he wanted a way to distribute his CDs, and then he figured out how to do that efficiently, and so other friends of his who had groups or solo CDs said, hey, would you handle the fulfillment for me? And he ended up selling the business for $9 million. But he's got a number of videos that are one is about starting a movement as well, which is he's got a bunch of really great stuff and a really, really good book as well.
The other thing that came to mind when Lance was talking was that when we had a trombone opening in Boston Brass, what year did you join? 2005? 5? Whatever. It's totally important to the story, which is why I'm spending time on it. Not at all. All right, so the year that we had a trombone opening, we had a number of, like a lot of super qualified people, musically, socially, professionally, all of that. One thing that Lance had above, like head and shoulders above every other candidate in the stack of resumes, and when we talked to him, was his business sense. And we immediately saw that he had an opinion for the direction that we should be going in. So it wasn't even just that, and he had kept on talking about changing careers himself, and it was very obvious that he thought about the end user, who you're trying to separate their money from if you're doing this for a living and not as a not as a hobby. And both are equally viable, but if you want to, if I stopped making any money and I kept leaving the house playing the tuba, at some point my wife would be like, can we maybe find something that you could get compensated for, So, because the diapers, we need them daily, it turns out. So I'm learning. So it's multiple times a day. It's relentless. So, but anyway, what was I talking about? All right, yeah, thank you for waking me up at 1 and at 3 and at 5. Thank you, Nicholas. All right.
Diapers and trombone go together.
Yeah, diapers and trombone. That must be why I went there, exactly. So Lance was, it was really obvious when we started talking to him that he was, that he had a clear idea of what we could accomplish, of what hadn't yet been accomplished within the brass quintet world, and about, and that he had an idea for a plan of how we could go and get there. And so imagine that somebody comes in and plays really well and has glowing glowing references and has a resume, and they're easy to work with, and you play and they sound good in the quintet, because we were fortunate enough that we were in a position that with the amount of work we did, that those are the kind of candidates that we got, which is awesome. But then we get Lance, who plays his tail off and who has all the the resume, and he has the references, and he's easy to get along with.
I didn't on the trombone.
Well, this is true. Yeah, that's very true. We'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that, he has this incredible passion for the business side of things, and has an idea of where we could go and how he could take us there, et cetera, et cetera. You want to talk about being the tiebreaker? I mean, it was a no-brainer. It was an absolute no-brainer that that guy is going to take me to where we need to go, more so than the other people. So, and what Lance was mentioning actually is that we had an idea that we were going to have a trombone opening a little bit before we did, and JD Shaw, our former horn player, I'm saying our, like I'm in the band. So there's some, I don't remember who replaced me. What was his name? Is Sam or something? Sam Palafian? Yeah, that's it. That's right. Yeah, he's a little known Armenian guy. He's old. He's adorable. So he's my mentor. So that's why I'm making fun of him, and calling him short. Anyways, so JD said to Lance, we're gonna have a trombone opening, and Lance said, you should hire a euphonium player, and JD said, you should learn how to play the trombone, and Lance said, okay. And he then went into his basement for like 6 months, right? 7 months, and he learned how to play the trombone. Like, no joke, he learned how to play the trombone. And then he came back and he was like, I can play the trombone now. And we're like, no, really? And he's like, no, really? And then he did. And was he as good a trombone player as some of the other people at the trombone? No, not at all. And yet, like, the learning curve was like, you know, it's like he doesn't really respond very well to the word no. And so, like on so many levels. So, but this is being broadcast, right? All right, we're going to leave that at that. But so he learned how to play the trombone. So he's got the business sense. He's easy to work with, at least initially. You know, there's sorry, we'll leave that alone too. Anyway, yeah.
Well, it sounds amazing. When we go, every time I tell the story to non-musicians, they think it's incredible, and the joke I used to tell is that, well, how hard could it be? Trombone players do it. I don't say that anymore. But
in terms of working on the stuff that you can't do, it is also on an individual level and on a group level. It is very important to identify if there is something that you can't do and you are not the best person to either do it or to learn how to do it on your own, to admit that to yourself and to then seek help from the appropriate people. In the classical music world, I think all of us on some level are kind of brought up to, you know, don't miss notes. You got to be perfect, and you don't really like to admit that, you know, that Pat Sheridan can play the Brahms slightly better than I can. I emphasize slightly in an ironic sense because like it's like, okay, I can't do that. I'll talk for an hour. How's that, Don? Yeah, that's that good. Cool. All right. You know, so but you need to if you're not the person to do something. And this goes along the lines, and this is something that everyone in here knows, but it's you know, we can all hear it over and over again. You have to be a good human being, and you have to be easy to work with for people to want to work with you. And so if you don't know how to do something, 3 words that do not come organically out of my mouth, although I'm getting way better at this now that I'm getting a little bit older, is just saying, I don't know. Just say, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. You'd think that maybe I feel like I even should, but I don't know. Let's find somebody that does know. So I know that me and a lot of the people I've worked with, you know, the first instinct is to just kind of start talking and then kind of like, you know, figure out the answer as it's leaving your mouth, you know. And that is somebody that you don't really want to work with for if at all, if not for very long. And that's also someone who, in general, I remember a masterclass of Joe Alessi's that I was attending, and someone asked him, you know, what's the key to winning an orchestral audition? And Joe very politely said that he hates that question just because it's such a complicated answer, and so it's hard in a soundbite to be able to say that. But the takeaway and his ultimate answer was, you know, he said that you have to be brutally honest with yourself about what you can and can't do. Like, record yourself all of the time. You know, he said that he tells his students that they should be recording themselves 50% of the time that they are practicing when they are preparing for a major audition. And he then, to like kind of put that into words, he said that, so if you have a 2-hour practice session, he said that all told, you should be spending an hour of that 2-hour practice session listening to a recording of what you just played. It was kind of like, wow, an hour, you know, a 1-to-1 ratio. But the point was that you had to be brutally honest with yourself about what you could and couldn't do. So if you need a website and you aren't, you know, your brain doesn't work that way, figure it out. You figure out somebody, do you need to pay someone to do this for you? Do you need to pay someone to give you advice? Do you need to find somebody that you don't have to pay for advice? Don't be afraid to fail, you know, but the 3 words, I don't know, are incredibly endearing. You know, and think about that. If you ask somebody for an answer to something and they simply say, I don't know, that's so much better than the alternative, you know, when they don't in fact know. So very, very, very important. Of course, you need to be able to play really softly in the extreme high register. You need to be able to play fast and get in and out of the low register at loud volumes. You need to be able to diminuendo like a clarinet. You need to be able to crescendo like a timpani. You need to be able to, you know, you need to be able to do all of that stuff, or else all the marketing in the world is not going to help you out. But you can kind of start to think of the end user when you're thinking about the skill set that you bring to the table, what you're lacking, or if you're talking about a band or a you know, a quintet, a trio, you know, whatever, in terms of who exactly are you trying to market to, and then you figure out exactly what their needs are, and then figure out why you are going to be the best person or people to meet those needs. And then you can kind of start to reverse engineer the skill sets, keeping in mind exactly what you are trying to accomplish.
Sometimes we think of marketing as sort of a dirty term, like it feels like we're selling out, like it isn't an artistic endeavor. It's not a valuable way to spend our time. And I would say that the best you can hope for marketing is that it gets you the first opportunity to interact with that client. And then, I'll say, it could be an audience member, it could be somebody who wants to hire you to do it, whatever. It could be a potential student. After that, you have to have the goods. All the slickest marketing in the world will get you the first visit, or the first time you watch a YouTube video. It's because I heard about this thing, and you'll watch the other ones and go check out the rest of the stuff based on that first thing. So don't assume. I don't want to give the impression, and I don't want to give the impression that the marketing tail will wag the dog, and then all of a sudden all your prayers will be answered because you've got a slick website. That isn't the case. And to pick up where Andrew left off, not only you figure out what this audience or potential client needs, and it might be that you're not what they need, but you can help them, and then all of a sudden you have a fan because you know who you need is Andrew Hitz on this thing. This guy can do da-da-da-da-da, and if you ever need XYZ, then call me. I'm happy to help you with that thing. So the more you can be in line with who you are as a person and as an artist, the happier you will be. And I was not in line when I was in Air Force Band. It was a misalignment with where I wanted to go artistically, with what I could do within the restraints of being in the Air Force Band. And so it just wasn't a good fit. Okay, I want to jump ahead now to another thing that Andrew mentioned. As I mentioned, I'm teaching a marketing and communications class. And it's undergrads and grad students. It's sort of an equal mix. And the biggest struggle that all of them face, and it's certainly a thing that's crossed my mind as well, is when we talk about marketing, we talk about, hey, let's write a press release, hey, let's get a photo, hey, let's have a logo, hey, let's have a slogan or whatever it is. I say, well, what is your product? And ultimately, this is kind of a harsh way of saying it, my product is, I'm wonderful. Right? Well, the product, if that's what you're trying to sell, you got big problems. You think about Pat and Sam, you think about the breathing gym, right? You think about you, and it might be that you want to become the world's preeminent interpreter of Brahms songs on the tuba. Fine, that's a thing to talk about that isn't, hey, I'm wonderful. It's, in the students in my class, it's a program that they're putting together that combines, it's an ensemble called Yoga Sebastian Bach, I swear to God. That's a combination of a yoga class and classical music. And there's a classical trio or quartet, I think it is, and they play music and a yoga class happens, and the hope is that the class gets to see what yoga is about. I mean, that the people who are there to hear the music get a different perspective on yoga, and the people who are participating in yoga get a different perspective on classical music. I had Koichiro Suzuki was a grad student of mine at Duquesne, I don't know, some time ago. And so he is passionate about tango music. Chewy's this guy's name, and he's a skinny Japanese dude, and I said, Chewy, why do they call you Chewy? His name's Koichiro. He says, oh, because of Chewbacca. And I said, well, why Chewbacca? Oh, I cannot tell you that. And it's 15 years on, and I still don't know the story, but it's probably a good one. Anyway, Chewy, passionate about tango, passionate about playing the euphonium. And he says, I just don't know what to do. And I said, play the euphonium in the tango band. And he wants to teach tango. Great. So teach tango classes, have your band play for the tango classes. You're cross-marketing, you build this little ecosystem, and they fuel off of each other. It was his passion. It's like the clouds parted, and all of a sudden this thing that was in front of me, he was struggling with, how do I do this? How do I want to talk, I'm wonderful, didn't get him anywhere. Hey, I have this tango band, and it happens to have this instrument you never heard of in it. That's a thing people lean forward and go, what's a euphonium? Well, okay, so there's that. Check out my video. What is the compensating euphonium compensating for? On YouTube now. Anyway, true story, actually. Ukulele.
That video exists. Yeah.
Another example from Boston Brass is in any of the touring brass quintets, you generally memorize your show, so you have a show that you tour for a number of years. And our management was always bugging us about having more offerings, because string quartets would have 3 or 4 or 5 programs to choose from. And the vocal groups the same way. They could draw on a different set of repertoire, and they didn't rely on memorization. And so it was a struggle for us to have another product. We had the educational product, but we were trying to figure out a way to have more offerings. To sort of compensate for the fact that we just couldn't memorize. Well, I guess we could have memorized 5 shows. It was just sort of a practicality thing. We were on the road about 170 days a year, and at some point you just sort of run out of time. The other, another part of the cultural landscape is that it used to be, in the heyday of Empire, those guys could go play in a 2,500 seat auditorium and get a really nice sized crowd, and do that for a living, and get thousands of people to come to these big theaters. Well, Riverdance happened, and then all of a sudden these huge spectacles happened, and then all of a sudden it gets really hard for chamber groups to fill a hall, especially a brass group. So we were looking for a way to have a bigger thing to see on stage, a bigger thing to hear, and a bigger idea. And so we had gone to Singapore a number of times. We're still at TV Story at one point. Andrew and I were on the equivalent of the Today Show in Singapore one time, and that we might get to that story. That's a pretty good one. But we had met this string quartet in residence at this Yongsu-to Conservatory, and hit it off with the 4 guys in the group, and thought, well, it'd be really fun to work with you guys. And so how could we make that happen? And that, I'd been thinking in the back of my head about this problem that our management had been talking to us about, and also this Riverdance phenomenon. And so now all of a sudden, this notion of working with a string group, which seems ludicrous on the face of it, because they're going to drown us out. 4 strings are going to be... Well, anyway, so we came up with... And we were looking for concepts of music that we could do, and ultimately settled on an idea that I stole from Matt Trotman, which was music of Romeo and Juliet. And so we ended up calling, so fast forward, we called it Notes from the Balcony. And now all of a sudden, there's something for our management to talk about that caused concert presenters to lean forward. Oh, it's brass quintet, it's string quartet, it's all Romeo and Juliet, there's West Side Story, there's Prokofiev, there's Kavalevsky, there's Elvis Costello, there's, it's a big variety of stuff. Now there's a thing to talk about. Boston Brass is great, gets you so far, but here's this event, and here's this spectacle, and gosh, I wonder what if it can create questions in your head. I wonder what that will look like. I wonder what the balance will be like. I wonder what pieces they'll play. I wonder, you just get all these sort of evocative things that come out of it because we had a thing to talk about rather than a we're wonderful to talk about.
22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and it's a pretty cheap ebook, and it's some of them don't apply to us, but some of them are, most of them absolutely apply to us. The good thing about marketing yourself as a musician or as a string quartet or a brass quintet or anything is that it is the exact same principles as marketing a tube of toothpaste. I mean, the exact same. And the good news there is that you can learn from any marketing material at all. So that you can hear somebody who was the head of marketing, the chief marketing officer for Procter & Gamble for 20 years, that man or woman can give you direct insights on how to get yourself booked as a soloist with high school bands. I mean, which is cool because it opens up and if you can find arts and music marketing specific stuff, fantastic. But just know that you don't need to. The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. The first one, the first law is that it's better to be first in a space. And then the example that the book gives is that the first person to successfully fly across the Atlantic Ocean was Charles Lindbergh, and everyone knows that name, and he's famous, and he has an airport named after him, and the plane he flew in is out by Dulles near my house in a museum, and he's very, very well known. The person who flew second across the Atlantic Ocean, whose name is escaping me right now, it's in the book, but he was a better pilot by every single metric. He did it faster, he used less fuel, he was a far superior pilot, and nobody knows his name. The third person to fly successfully across the Atlantic, everyone knows, and it's not because they were third, it's because they were first in their own space, and that was Amelia Earhart, and she was the first female to fly successfully across the ocean. Everybody knows her name. So the moral of that story for us is that don't let me or Blance or anybody tell you that you are not going to be, the one who replaces John Cradler, in the band when he decides to retire in the Marine band. Someone is going to, right? Somebody, that is going to be somebody, and don't let me tell you it's not going to be you, but if you run the math, it's pretty simple that the chances of that one specific position being you, not that good. I don't care how good you are, it depends on your day, it depends on the mood of the panel, it depends on the weather, the wind, like what you ate the week before.
If there's an opening when you're ready. I mean, you can be ready and then there's no openings for 5 years, and then what?
Exactly. So you can simply be better than everybody else and get a job. That's how every one of those people, and yes, the auditions process is incredibly flawed, and yet you listen to the Marine, the military bands here, you listen to the Army band, the ceremonial band, the field band, they're really, really, really good. I mean, they're absolutely world class. So there's some way that the great musicians end up getting through, but that's a really tough road to hoe if that's the only path that you are taking. It's easier to kind of create your own path somewhere. I don't discourage anyone from forming a brass quintet that's 2 trumpets, French horn, trombone, and tuba. But if a student came to me and said, I don't have anybody in mind, I don't have any product in mind, I want to create something and I want to figure this out, and so what about a brass quintet? I would say, why on earth would you do that? Because there's already so many really, really, really good ones. And you can do your own thing, and you can just do the Boston brass thing better than Boston brass. You could do the Canadian brass thing better than the Canadian brass. And don't let me tell you can't, but man, is that an uphill battle. If you, I'm assuming a lot of you have heard the group Time for Three. This is a trio, a string trio. It's 2 violins and a bass, and they are officially exploding at this point. I've known the 3 of them since all 4 of us were quite poor and not yet being compensated for all the hours in the practice room. And they are, again, it's 2 violins and a bass. That's got my attention right away. Like, what does that sound like? Why? There's no cello, there's no viola. They're not playing Beethoven string quartets, which I'm a passionate fan of, by the way. But there's already so many great groups playing Beethoven quartets. I don't think that the marketplace is screaming for another one as much as these guys, who are classically trained. They all went to Curtis. One of the violinists is the concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony. And they also all can play like bluegrass and can improvise. The bass player, Renan, is not only is an incredible classical player, phenomenal, can play any concerto written for the bass as well as just about anybody in the world, but he also was he made his living when he was a kid, starting in middle school. He was a gigging jazz bass player in clubs for $20 here, for $30 there. He's played over 1,000 jazz gigs, so he's got that skill as well. So they're almost like a classical jam band, if you will, in terms of a trio, and their skill set is just screaming for composers who want to write for them. They have created a new space. They did not just simply become the best 2 violin and a bass group who plays classical music and yet can also improvise. They're the first one to ever do that. And with the internet nowadays, if you send me, if I see that there's a new brass quintet, I might click on that, and I love brass quintet, I really do. I might click on that, but if I see that somebody's got a group that is that's oboe and glockenspiel and helicon, it's I'm gonna, it's probably Tom Holtz playing. That's the first thing. So I'm gonna be yeah, I'll check that out.
The glockenspiel part.
Yeah, the glockenspiel. Yeah, exactly. That's what he's done since he left the Marine band. He's become a glockenspiel player. Yeah, he's played no gigs yet. But no, it's that's got my attention. And if it's horrible, I'm gonna stop watching after. Well, if it's really horrible, I'm gonna share it with everyone I know. But if it's just kind of horrible, then I'll stop watching after 15, 20 seconds, and I won't be mad. I won't be upset. I won't even think about it again. I'll just move on to the next tweet, to the next Facebook post, to to whatever. But that's already got my attention.
From a business standpoint, I mean, it's a way to think of it is you want to go into the brass quintet space. Why? How are you going to compete with all of the other quintets? There's how many? Maybe a half dozen that make a living doing it on the planet. So are you going to go out for less money? There was a group that came on 10 years or so ago, something like that, and they looked they looked the part, and they worked really hard and they were on the road a ton, but they made no money. So then it becomes a revolving door. So if you're going to try and compete on price, it's going to be really tough to go up against Boston Brass, Canadian Brass, Dallas Brass, the other group, Spanish Brass, that are doing it. So maybe money, artistically, what are you going to do that Empire didn't do or Canadians didn't do? I mean, I'm willing to hear it. I'm waiting to hear it. The most interesting thing to me, chamber brass wise, is monosyl, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if that floats your boat or not, but what those 7 psychopaths do on a regular basis is the most fascinating, spectacular, wonderful stuff that I know of. And I hear some really great brass quintets, and brass quintets from time to time will ask me to listen to them, give them a coaching. I'm happy to help. There is all sorts of worth in terms of your musical growth and development. I'm a huge champion of playing chamber music, but why? What is the reason? If you want to make some money playing weddings and doing this and having recitals, and we want to play the Malcolm Arnold and all that, great, do all that. If you want to do it for a living, you better have a better answer than that. If you say, let's take the euphonium example. I want to play the euphonium professionally. Okay, why? What? Well, for why? Why? So I want to play all these concertos. I want to be the next Stephen Mead, Brian Bowman, Adam Fry. Okay, that's fine. That's cool. Those guys are doing that. I want to be the greatest jazz, funk, euphonium player. I know that guy, and he's sitting right there. Ryan McGeorge is the guy. He carved out a niche. He went where others didn't. Why? Because he thought it was a great marketing opportunity? Doubt it. It's probably, I doubt it. It's because it was in line, I'm guessing, it was in line with his values, his skills, his interests, all that stuff. And so he went where they didn't. Oh, I should learn to play the Linkola. Okay, that's fine, do that. But if you're not into it, don't do that. If you're into funk, if you're into tango, if you're into glockenspiel, then do that and find your market. That's the advantage now, is that the market is global. The hard part is you got to go do it. You got to identify. You have to stick your neck out. He didn't know if that was going to be a successful venture or not. It is. It's awesome. It's great. If you haven't heard it, you've got to check it out. He's always shocked when I say nice things about him. Actually, the second time I met Ryan McGeorge was judging George Mason. Roger ran this contest. I don't remember the name of it. Whatever it was. And so the 3 judges we had to hear vintage 35 times one day. So, and they wouldn't let us drink. But, so anyway, the other judges was Jen Dayton Cox and Ryan. So Ryan comes in and I was like, hey man, how you doing? Ryan McGeorge, Marine Band, blah, blah, blah. I was like, do I know you? And he goes, yeah, you gave me a lesson at Falcone one time. I was like, oh, cool, was I nice to you? And he goes, no. Oh, okay, all right. No. I said, was it helpful? And he said, yes. I said, okay, I don't feel bad then. But so, go where they ain't. I mean, it's a much easier thing in the respect that there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. It's a business book, and it talks about, you can go into what they call a red ocean. There's lots of fighting. There's lots of blood in the water. You can go to a blue ocean where there's nobody there. Breathing Gym didn't exist, and now it does. That was a market that didn't exist before, and those guys have made a nice living and impacted a bunch of lives in a positive way because they went and did a thing that didn't exist before. That's what we want to see.
A great example of the Breathing Gym. If you look at the cover of the book, at the very top, there's a little yellow box that says for band and chorus is what that little box says. And Pat talked to me in an interview in my book, which you should buy because I got to buy diapers. He
use the book.
He talked about there you go. It's an ebook that would get expensive, like really expensive. Yeah, cloth? Oh no, I use Kindles. Yeah, all right. Wow, where am I? Okay, I'm back. All right. So Pat talked about, that can't be safe, right? Yeah, no. I'm thinking this through. It's like, this is getting worse and worse and worse in my head. All right. Let's talk about Ryan some more. Yeah, all right. Because he looks so comfortable with us talking about him. No, Pat talked about how when they first started, trying to kind of sell that as a product, those exercises were around for a long time before the Breathing Gym became the Breathing Gym. I have handouts that were photocopied from a Masterclass in like the mid '80s in Boston that I got in the late '80s that my high school teacher gave to me that basically has all the Breathing Gym exercises in it, but it's in a different order, and they've kind of they've fleshed it out a little bit, and they've put it in. And I mean, it's vastly improved since then. But like the skeleton of it was just kind of handed around before. And he said at first that they were trying to sell that as breathing exercises for tuba players, and then for low brass players, which they're fantastic for low brass players. We need to use a lot of air. We need to be efficient. Even those of us with huge lungs need to be efficient. So it's great. However, it was Dr. Tim Lotznizer, who's also interviewed in my book, who talked about how he told them, he said, you guys are being dumb. Why are you marketing this to just tuba players? He said, do you like money? And Pat was like, yes, I do like money. And so Tim said, you need to market this. This is good for all wind players. So why on earth would you only sell yourself, this product to just a very small portion of all of the wind and brass players? And then this opened up to the choirs, to the bands, to all school music programs, to everybody. And by that little yellow box that Dr. Tim insisted on them putting on the cover, Pat said that is like that little tiny thing is what helped to make that thing explode. Very, very, very important to kind of know who your audience is.
Well, and sometimes it goes back, I know I've been hitting this note over and over again, but it goes back to fear. Why are you just trying to market this to brass players? Well, we know brass players. I know a bunch of teachers that play brass. I know a bunch of low brass guys. It's easier. It's less scary. But the payoff is so much greater. And what happens if you fail? Famine? Doubtful? I mean, that's a big failure. How are you going to do that with a tuba? When he could. But this fear is just, it's my motto, and the thing that my students are sick of me talking about is ready, fire, aim. Just like ready, fire, and then we'll figure out, we should have shot in that direction instead of this direction. Seth Godin is one of my favorite authors and speakers. He talks about shipping. You have this idea and you sit on it. I wrote this book, The Music Practice Coach. I was gonna write this book for 10 years. And then finally one summer I was like, I'm writing this book. It's just gonna happen so I can get it out of my blasted head and ship it. And then it did what it did. And it was successful in some ways beyond my wildest imagination, and it failed in ways that I thought it might succeed. But until I shipped it, until I delivered it and let the universe say, then it was just this thing. We're afraid to fail. There's another great, if you don't know where to start in terms of this, there's another business book called The Lean Startup. And it talks about failing early and then adjust and try again. Just get it to what they call an MVP, a minimum viable product. What's the minimum? So Ryan, we're going to pick on him some more because he's exquisitely uncomfortable now. So he's going to go play one tune. He's going to sit in with a band. That's a minimum viable product. And people react in a super negative way and throw fruit and vegetables at him. He has a decision to make. Okay, either wrong product or wrong crowd. But he learned a thing by going and sticking his neck out and doing a little bit of it that he didn't know before he stuck his neck out. It's ready, fire, aim. It's my mantra. I was going to tattoo it, but then I misspelled it. So never mind.
The one thing that is also very important is David Cutler, who's the author of The Savvy Musician, who is a professor of entrepreneurship down at the University of South Carolina. He has a great quote, which is that if you don't have a website, you are invisible. And that's his, he doesn't really butter it up at all. Think about all of the music that you discover now, think about all of the people you discover, think about all of these things. Where do you get them all? Generally speaking, it's going to be online. And so you need to have a website, and you need to think about your, who is your website geared towards? Another old, marketing truth that you hear in every single marketing book. This is like the first day of marketing class. They talk about if you're marketing to everyone, then you're marketing to no one. So if you're trying to sell yourself simultaneously to young students, to professional players, to teachers, to old folks' homes, to brass quintet series, to kid shows, to
We play all kinds of music. How many groups have I had? We play every possible style of music. We play Baroque, and we play some Dixieland, and some of the contemporary works. Okay, and that's all different? That's it? Okay. You got a ska tune in there, now you've got my attention. You've got spoken word, fine. There's a guy who puts down his tuba and picks up a glockenspiel, I want to know about it.
Tom Holtz is our inspiration for really everything.
Do I only get 6 months?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, man. That's what
Yeah.
used to do.
Yeah, exactly.
How hard could it be? Glockenspielers do.
Yeah. Glockenspielers. Yeah.
That's a word.
I don't know if that's a word either. So, so you need to figure out who your website is aimed at. My website is aimed at primarily aimed at music educators. Those are the main people that end up hiring me. I do go to colleges and do music business presentations, and I also play recitals, I play solos, but in general, the main people that are hiring me nowadays is like, say, a high school band who's going to hire me to come in and to spend an entire day with the program and to rehearse a solo tune with the band and to maybe work with the tubas and to do a masterclass and talk about, and I don't sell myself anymore. I used to say I can come in, I can work with your tubas, or I could do a brass section, or I could talk to the whole band. Well, again, I'm leading kind of how the breathing gym, like how they wanted to lead with the breathing gym until Dr. Tim intervened. So now how I lead, and this isn't trickery, because I have all of these things available, which is why the marketing thing is not a dirty, a dishonest concept. I now say, I can come in and I can talk to your entire band, I can talk to your entire music program about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, and about how they need to embrace failure, and about how they need to sound bad in the practice room, and about how they'll get more done in less time, and then the better they get, the more they're going to practice, and it's going to feed the whole thing. That's going to get your kids excited, as you know, that then gets their parents excited. And when the parents are excited, you look good, your administrators are happy, the band boosters raise more money. I mean, it's just kind of like, it's like this is how these things have worked forever and a day. And I'm happy to spend some time with your tubas, I'm happy to do this, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not leading with the little thing anymore. I'm leading with the big thing, because they can also possibly justify using like school-wide money for me to be talking about things like mindset, which is something that a lot of schools are having their teachers, like at the beginning of the end of the summer when they all get in for a week, a lot of those schools are talking about that very topic. So I then come in and talk on top of that to the kids, and it's a much more easily sold thing to their higher ups, if that makes sense. And so you just kind of need to know who. So I have a blog on my website, which is how I drive most of the traffic to my website, which I do like a few posts a week. And it's all kind of like education based, and so I kind of have an end user, and I post a video clip a week, and the number one reason that I post whatever video clip I do is because I think it's cool. That's kind of the end of it, But then the things that I write, the links that I collect from other places, it kind of all has someone in mind. On my website, I have a bio, and if you're clicking on my bio and you then want to know everything that I've done, that's going to be a lot better received by you than if I say to Ryan, enough about your funk, let's talk about me some more. And then I just keep talking. I'm like, hey, did you know I play with this? Did you know I accomplished this? Did you know this? But it's like when you're soliciting it, you want to know, and there's a hire me link on there that I've made it very easy for band directors and other people to get in touch with me, whether it be for consulting, whatever. And Lance's website, which is very different than mine, and yet is a really great website. It's very clear who he's trying to reach with what message, and he makes it very easy for the people that are on there to kind of get out of that website what they're looking for.
I have 3 groups basically. I was trying to figure out. I've done lots. I've been a super duper lucky dude, and I've gotten to do some amazing things and work with spectacular musicians all over the place. And also I'm a knucklehead. So I have these 3 channels that people are usually looking for me for: the book, or some sort of educational thing I said, or a speech I gave, or a paper I wrote, something like that, or the music practice coach. And then there's the people who are drawn to my beautiful, eloquent, lovely songs that I sing with the ukulele, such as the aforementioned What's the Euphonium, Compensating Euphonium Compensating For, and a song about Mother's Day called Your Mama, and a song about getting underwear for Christmas, those sorts of things. So there's a certain group of people who don't care a whit about that, but they want to see those songs, and then there's other people who are into the euphonium stuff. So I have it broken into Learn, Laugh, and Lance, and it's really easy to tell by the pictures. Oh, okay, I'm the euphonium nerd, I want to go down that path, and boom, there's 85,000 Boston Brass videos and all of that stuff. If you want just the goofy stuff, you can go there. trying to make it easy for those people to find what they want. And if you want to book me, at the very top there's an electronic press kit, bang. And by the way, if you want a free copy of my book, go to my site and click on the contact page and fill out the stuff, and I'll send you a free PDF of it.
Lance and I are in the process of writing a book together right now, which really is proof that anybody can do it. It's called 27 Questions Every Music Major Should Be Asking Themselves. So, and our good friend John Rojak, who I was interviewing last week, said that he suggested that the book simply say the question why 27 times. So, it's going to be really cheap because we just want a lot of people to buy it. So buy it, and that might be the whole book. So I was like, yeah, we'll thank our parents, and thank my wife and my son, and then it'll just be 27 questions of why. So yeah, why did I do this? So, and you can find me at andrewhitz.com. You can find him at musicpracticecoach.com. We're both on Twitter. We both have Facebook pages. We're kind of hard to get away from online, which can be annoying, but that's your problem. So thank you very much to everybody here, in the Army Band. A huge thank you to our hosts there, and thank you all for coming. Have a great day.